All right, so we're continuing our factoring trinomials. We're looking at here where a is equal to 1. So in the last lesson, you looked at where a was equal to 1, and you were only looking at positives. So that doesn't always happen to be the case. So sometimes you have a negative, whether it's in the middle or at the end, or both of them are negative. So we're just going to look at and see what that looks like as far as when you go to factor. So a is still equal to 1, which means that our coefficient in front of x squared is still 1. Now, we call that a because remember our standard form for trinomials, or what you would later end up calling quadratics, is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. And remember here that last lesson we talked about the factors of c that add together to give you b. So it's that O and the I of FOIL that go together that make that middle term. Now, what you'll notice here is that sometimes I have a negative. So there's two different ways to look at it, and I am going to kind of sort of talk about, I will go ahead and voice both of them, but the way that I kind of see it is maybe a little bit different. So here's what we're going to do. So remember from last lesson, we're going to try to find the factors of the last term. So the factors of my last term here are 18. So instead of trying to find factors of 18 that add to 7, we're going to find factors of 18 that subtract to give you 7. So that minus sign in front of 18 makes it be a subtraction. So let's look here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to write out my factors of 18. So I have, 1 times 18, and then I have 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. Okay, so the two that are going to subtract together to give me 7 are going to be this pair right here, 2 times 9. 2 and 9, when you do 9 minus 2 is going to give you 7. So what we have here is, so remember that when we go to write our factors, we have x starting out first. So x times x gives me the x squared. That's that first part of the FOIL. And then I want to have a negative 2 and a positive 9. A negative 2 and a positive 9 because 9 minus 2. And also because, so one of them has to be positive, one has to be negative, so that you have a negative 18. So that's how you can look at it, is that you're looking at that sign right in front of C, and that will tell you add or subtract to give you your middle term. So this would be our factors here. We're moving on. The other way that you can look at this is that you can list out all the factors with a positive and a negative on both places. So if you have x squared minus 9x minus 22, I'm going to find factors of negative 22 that add together that give me a negative 9. So what this looks like is 1 times negative 22 or negative 1 times 22. And then you also have, 2 times negative 11 or negative 2 times positive 11. So when I add those two together, that's going to give me negative 9. It's going to be this pair right here, 2 and negative 11. This helps you know where the sign needs to go. So here I'm going to have x plus 2 times x minus 11. So that way when I do the O and the I, the inside part, I'm going to end up with a negative 9 there. And that's the other way that you can look at it. It's always going to add to that middle term, but you're going to have to list out more factors. And that's where I don't like it. I would rather just look at all the factors. Okay, am I adding or subtracting here? And then figure out from there which two I'm going to use. That's just kind of up to you. Okay, so let's look at this one. This one's a little bit trickier because you have a minus sign in the front, and then you have the 30 or the second sign, the sign in front of C is a positive, and so therefore you're gonna say that kind of looks kind of funky because you're gonna say, well, those two numbers are supposed to add to give you negative 15. Well, remember when you add two negatives together, they make even more negative. So I want to find factors of 36 that add to give me negative 15. Or I'm just going to say add together to give me 15. So 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, and 6 times 6. Almost forgot that one. So two numbers that add together that give me 15 are going to be right here at 3 and 12. So what that looks like is I'm going to have x minus 3 and x minus 12, because when I multiply a negative 3 and a negative 12, it's going to give me a positive 36. When I have negative 3 plus negative 12, it's going to give me a negative 15. So that's kind of sort of there, what you're looking for here. So then when you're trying to look at all the factors and you are going to have to list out both double negatives, both of them are negative, it gets a little confusing. So that's why I prefer to always look at that sign right in front of C, and that will tell me if I'm going to add, my factors are going to add to give me my middle term, or if they're going to subtract to give me my middle term. So here, let's look here and just kind of sort of walk through this. So if I have a minus sign, that means that my factors of C are going to subtract C. Factors are going to subtract. Okay, if you're looking at the plus sign of the C, if C has a plus sign in front of it, the factors will add. Also, with the plus sign, the signs will be the same. Okay, and right here, if you have a minus sign in front of C, the signs will be different, will be opposite. And then let's look at B. So if B is positive, so let's go here. So if B is positive, then the larger factor will take that plus sign. Actually, if it's positive or negative. So if you're looking at the C part here, and C is negative, so which means your signs are going to be opposite, the larger factor takes the negative sign, okay? Takes the sign of B. Takes the sign of B. So if B is negative, they both be, or one be, the larger factor would be negative, and the smaller factor would be positive. And then vice versa, if B is positive, then the larger factor would take the positive, and the smaller factor takes the negative. And that's kind of sort of how you can remember which one goes where. Or just kind of, you may have to kind of quickly foil out in your head. And it gets easier and it gets better, but it does take a little bit of time to kind of train your brain this way. So main thing is that you're still looking at the C, you're still looking at factors of C to add or subtract to give you your middle term there. Looking at that sign, making sure those signs all line up. And that's pretty much it. So building on yesterday, throwing in those negatives makes it a little bit more difficult, but you got this.